We've got Quest Warrior, we've got Face Hunter, Elemental Shaman, Questa Rogue, Libram Paladin. Hey guys, if you watched my previous video, you saw me talk about what I was actually seeing at the high legend meta. And you're probably wondering, well, I'm not a top 100 legend. What should I play? So I've gotten decks for December. What I recommend you play to get the legend. The Vicious Syndicate just came out, report today when I'm recording this, but this video will probably be released later. But if you haven't gone and read that, that's you can see a huge meta breakdown, and the reality is there's actually a huge amount of meta diversity right now. There's so many different decks that you can get to legend with successfully. They're going to have a good successful win rate right now. It's really interesting. And what's also interesting, the decks that are the best at, Diamond through 4 aren't necessarily the best at top 1000, aren't necessarily the best at legend. The decks I'm recommending today are all good decks that get to legend. They all have a good win rate from Diamond 1 through Diamond 4. And they're also what I call tempo decks. So by a tempo deck, you're spending mana, you're playing minions, you're kind of trying to spiral ahead and use that to push an advantage to win. It's one of the most fundamental ways to win in Hearthstone. It's the most common way to win in Hearthstone. And so when people say, well, what's this deck's win condition? Almost everyone is play minions. Play minions, get more minions, hit in the face. Use those minions. So one of the things about tempo is you get ahead on board, and then you're able to take value trades. So if I'm first ahead on board, I can trade a 3/3 into a 2/3, but then have my 3/1 trade into their 4/3. Where they're first ahead on board, they could switch the trades and be better off. So that's why it can be so ahead to get ahead on board quickly. And tempo decks used to sort of try and spiral ahead on board, push their advantage, and go for a win. So I think they're really, really good decks for beginners and intermediate players to play. If you're a beginner intermediate player, don't be going for some crazy late game value deck or some big control deck with undefined win conditions that you have to really know the meta, know how to stop every single one of your opponent's win conditions. Not what I recommend. Play a deck that has their own win condition and is sort of proactive. And you learn this. Now, later on, you could go to that. But I think if you're trying to especially get to legend for the first time, or even the second or third, these are the strategies that will maximize, and these are strategies that you can work on your fundamentals, especially your tempo fundamentals. So first, we've got Quest Warrior. I was reading the Vicious Syndicate report today. Apparently, Amalgam is a good enough card in the deck. Makes the cut. I haven't tested it out. I always like Amalgam as a card, so I'm kind of happy to see that. It's just a cool card. But yeah, Quest Warrior is a fantastic deck to get to legend with. Basically, this deck is already ravaging in wild, but what do you do with this deck? You spend your mana, you play Raid the Docks, you play Pirates, you try and get ahead on board. Often, some games you're going to win without even getting down Mr. Smite. Some days you're going to, but then if you're kind of going out and eventually you play the quest reward, or not Mr. Smite, the Rakara. And then if you're kind of playing against another good tempo deck, you're fighting for board, but then you get your quest down, and then all of a sudden you're doing 4 damage a turn, plus weapon, plus free pirate, and that additional tempo / value push is usually enough to win you the game. Next we've got Face Hunter. This is what my dad gets to legend with every month. He plays a bunch of other stuff, and then he waits till the end of the month, and he says he goes in while the herd is weak. He plays Face Hunter, and the reality is Face Hunter puts pressure on your opponent to kill them. You spend your mana. Face Hunter usually want to get a board advantage in the first 1 or 2 through 3 turns, and then usually after that you kind of throw away board, except for some trampling rhinos, and you just start hitting them in the face with burn or with your trampling rhinos. Some games not every game is different. Occasionally you have a game where you're still fighting for board in the late game. Most of the time you want to be pushing for board early, not prioritizing value trades except for the very first few turns, and then going face. So yeah. Next, we've got Elemental Shaman, and I'm choosing a more classic elemental shaman as opposed to Doomhammer Shaman. Doomhammer Shaman is a good archetype too. But what I like about elemental shaman is, remember, I'm trying to have decks that are good for beginners and intermediates in this video. And I really don't like Doomhammer Shaman. I don't recommend it for beginners and intermediate players, even though you could learn it, is because it kind of allows you to neglect your fundamentals. It allows you to say, oh, I'm just going to play Doomhammer and hit it in the face. And that actually can work for players, but I think it's better to be forced to play minions and win with minions. With this deck, you do have Sunburn, but for the most part, you have to win with minions. You play your minion advantage, you have your weapons, you might freeze their board, and you're just kind of continuously playing minions. You might hex with a Lily Pad Lurker if they have a powerful threat, but you're kind of just keeping on fighting for board, fighting for tempo. The new version runs some of the snow stuff. I was surprised on this. This is pretty cool. That this sees play, this Ice Revenant, but it runs the Snowfall Guardians, it runs the Baron Glacier, and it runs Brucon. Brucon in this list I think is a must craft, but Baron is not. I recommend, if you don't have Baron, to run Alexstrasza. That is a free core card, so everyone has it. But yeah, if you don't have Baron and you're on a budget, don't craft this. But Brucon is a good investment. It's one of the highest win rate cards in so many Shaman decks, so it's a very, very strong card. So if you're looking to play Shaman for the long run, Brucon's a card I would recommend crafting. Baron is not a card I would recommend crafting. So if you already have Baron, go ahead and play this list. But if you don't, try out an Alexstrasza. I've looked up some stats, and it looks like a very reasonable substitution. But yeah, what does this deck do? Play elementals, get a board. They play a minion, you play a whack-a-mole hammer, hit their minion, buff up your boards, just keep pushing damage. At some point, they start to fight back. Snowfall Guardian, bam, big minion, hit him in the face, bam, easy. So, anyways, let's go to the next deck. Next deck, we got Questa Rogue. So, a lot of the first three decks I did were all, I think, most beginner friendly. We're starting to get this is more intermediate. Now, this isn't super high level. It's still, close to be like beginner friendly, but the turns are a little more complex. You have, when do I play passage? When do I do the plays that I do? But this deck is one of the highest win rate archetypes at Legend. At the absolute top 1,000, it does a little bit worse, but it's still good. All right, you can apply this all the way up. Reality, like I said in my previous video, if you're playing Rogue, you're gonna win. That being said, this deck is a little bit harder. You have a little bit more decisions, like things like, do I go off on Edwin? Do I, prioritize, do I, use SI7 Assassin now to try to get discounted more? There's a little more decisions, like especially I think, when to go passage. There's a lot of these like setting up turns. So try and think this deck, like, what am I going to do this turn and what am I going to do next turn? Don't fall in the trap of destroying your next turn for this turn. You do the perfect play and then but you throw away your coin and then it's like turn 5 and you maybe have no play because you needed to go coin smite or coin shadow scabs, something like that. Try and think multi-turn ahead. How are you going to win long term? But yeah, bottom line is this is one of the best decks in the game. It's very well rounded, fantastic deck to get to Legend. But like I said, the other preview decks were more beginner-friendly decks. This is a little more intermediate, but not this. At the end of the day, you're spending your stuff, you're going towards your quest reward, you're playing your quest, you're getting stealth, and you're pushing damage. So still a very sort of not advanced deck, I would say. So, and finally, we got Libram Paladin. This is actually the strongest deck on the climb to Legend statistically, if you read in the Vicious Syndicate report. But that being said, and this is their list that they featured. They said Smite apparently is good, which I was surprised that, I don't know, it seems weird, but apparently Smite's just a good card. But what's interesting about this, or I might say, I don't recommend this for beginner players. This is kind of intermediate because there are actually a lot of mechanics and there's a lot of sort of late game value trading. So you have a giant board, they have a giant board, you're getting a trade-off, when do you save Broom? It's actually, now the fact that it has such a high win rate on Diving Through Legend is actually interesting, in that the deck's probably so strong that it kind of shields you from your mistakes. because I think players make a lot more mistakes. This deck is not brain dead. There's a lot of mechanics, things like using your wisdoms, things like using brooms effectively, things like when do I use my broom, when do I be greedy, when do I not be greedy. There's a lot of actually tough decisions. Do I save the coin for a fast Lightforge Cariel? Do I use the coin for Alliance Bannerman? Do I use the coin for Aldor Trueseeker? These are all tough questions that when you're playing, and then, can I effectively do value trades quickly? Often you might, be playing double Devout Pupil Broom, rushing in, double trade, because often you're behind on board with this deck because you're kind of being greedy. You have a low 1 through 4 curve. So you have to kind of swing back at the board. So while this is one of the absolute best decks to get to Legend, I would actually recommend one of the first three, especially if you haven't been to Legend over this. I think this deck is a lot harder than people give it credit for, and just because it has a really high win rate doesn't mean you will have a good high win rate. So if you've worked on your Libram skills and if you can think about like the long term and like look at a value matchup, because this is very much can have a lot of control matchups where you're playing against a deck that has a lot of stuff and you have a lot of stuff, and it's about spreading out your stuff. And that's actually a really, really advanced part of the game that a lot of players don't do well. And, as me as a, high level player, if I'm trying to outplay somebody, I know I'm not going to be able to beat them that much in the early game. I'm, did I coin out a 1-drop, 2 1-drops, or did I, those early game decisions, I'm less likely to get an edge. But I know if I can get it into the late game, people start making a lot more mistakes. And this is a deck that people will make a lot more mistakes in the late game, but you will make a lot more mistakes. So it's a thing of, if you have good late game skill, or if you want to develop good late game skill, this is a great deck to work on. But if you haven't really mastered your tempo fundamentals, I would not recommend this deck. But that being said, it is one of the best decks to get to Legend statistically. So I can't, have a top 5 list without it, really. So anyways, those are my top 5. There are a ton of decks to get Legend. Go read the Vicious Syndicate report. I'll have a link to their report in this. There's 1,000 decks, so you can choose your poison. Remember, you can get the deck Legend with anything. You can get the Legend with a 45% win rate deck. It's not recommended, but you can do it. People do it all the time. But that being said, if you're trying to get a Legend, that's one of your goals. These are the decks I would recommend. So anyways, hope you guys like that. Enjoy.